The Zephyrian High Council chamber stretched endlessly upward, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that reflected the collective anxiety of the assembled delegates. Representatives from 47 star systems had gathered for what many believed would be their final diplomatic meeting. The Void Hunters had consumed 3 entire sectors in the past solar cycle, and their relentless advance showed no signs of slowing. At the center of the vast chamber, suspended in a gravity well, floated the most feared creature in known space. Kithara, the Deathbringer, measured nearly 200 meters from snout to tail, her obsidian scales seeming to absorb light itself. Ancient scars crisscrossed her hide, each one a testament to countless battles across the galaxy. Her 6 eyes, each the size of a transport vessel, glowed with an inner fire that had reduced entire fleets to cosmic dust. Ambassador Veleth of the Centauri Coalition stepped forward, his 4 arms trembling despite his diplomatic training. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked nervously as he approached the dragon's massive head. "Great Kithara," Veleth began, his translator converting his chittering into the dragon's ancient tongue. "We come before you in our darkest hour. The Void Hunters have breached the Outer Rim. Our combined fleets cannot stop them. We offer you tribute beyond measure if you will defend our worlds." The dragon's laugh rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, causing several smaller delegates to flee through the emergency exits. "Tribute?" Kithara's voice resonated directly into their minds, bypassing their hearing entirely. "What could you possibly offer that I have not already taken when it pleased me?" Veleth gestured frantically to his aide, who wheeled forward a containment unit filled with rare quantum crystals. "The entire output of the Rigel mining colonies for 1,000 cycles, Great One." "Trinkets," the dragon dismissed with a flick of her massive tail that sent shockwaves through the chamber's atmosphere. The Aquarian delegate, a flowing creature of pure energy, pulsed with desperate bioluminescence. "The coordinates to every hidden world in the Magellanic clouds, including the lost library worlds of the ancients." "Already known to me," Kithra replied, her interest clearly waning. "You waste my time with these pathetic offerings." As delegate after delegate presented their treasures, technologies, and territories, the dragon's dismissals grew more contemptuous. The Andromedans offered their reality-shaping engines. The Vegan Collective presented their time-locked archives containing the secrets of immortality. The Silicon Brotherhood pledged their quantum computing networks that could simulate entire universes. All were rejected. As the last major power finished their presentation, silence fell over the chamber. The dragon's massive head swiveled slowly, surveying the assembled representatives with predatory patience. "Is this all?" Kithara's mental voice carried cruel amusement. "The Great Galactic Alliance reduced to beggars? Perhaps the Void Hunters will provide more interesting sport than you cowards." It was then that a small transport pod, so tiny it had been overlooked by the chamber's sensors, drifted into the central space. The pod bore the markings of Earth, a recently discovered world on the galaxy's outer edge that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. From the pod emerged Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the Terran Federation. She stood barely 1.5 meters tall, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a basic environmental suit that looked primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding her. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be ordinary fabric. The other delegates turned their attention to this unexpected arrival, many expressing surprise through their various biological and technological means of communication. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a curiosity, a species that had somehow achieved spaceflight despite their violent history and relatively short lifespan. Most civilizations viewed them as barely above the level of interesting pets. Ambassador Chen walked steadily toward the dragon, showing no sign of the fear that had paralyzed beings far more advanced than herself. When she reached the optimal speaking distance, She stopped and looked directly into Kithara's central eyes. "Great Kithara," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly in the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity offers its most precious gift." The dragon's massive head lowered slightly, intrigued despite herself. "And what might that be, little mammal? Your weapons are primitive, your technology borrowed, your lifespan barely a flicker. What could your infant species possibly possess that would interest me?" Without hesitation, Chen carefully unwrapped the bundle in her arms, revealing a sleeping human infant. The baby, no more than a few months old, stirred slightly at the movement, but remained peaceful. Tiny fingers curled into delicate fists. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Several delegates began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of shock and disbelief. The Centauri ambassador's mandibles clicked frantically as he processed what he was witnessing. "You offer me a food morsel?" Kithara asked, though her tone had shifted from contemptuous amusement to something approaching genuine curiosity. "Not as food," Chen replied calmly. "As family." The dragon's 6 eyes focused intently on the human ambassador. For the first time since the gathering began, Kithara seemed genuinely surprised. "Explain." Chen adjusted her hold on the baby, her movements protective, yet confident. "This child was born 3 days ago on our colony ship Endurance. His parents died in a transport accident, and he has no family left. Our social services would normally place him with adoptive parents, but we've chosen to offer him to you instead." "You would sacrifice a youngling to appease me?" The dragon's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Not sacrifice," Chen corrected firmly. "Adopt, raise, love. We offer you the chance to be his guardian, his teacher, his parent. We ask that you raise him as your own." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the ambient humming of the various life support systems seemed muted. The concept was so unprecedented that the translation systems of several species began malfunctioning, unable to process the intent behind Chen's words. "You are either the bravest or most foolish creature I have encountered in 3 millennia, Kithara said slowly. "Do you understand what you propose? I am Kithara the Deathbringer. I have laid waste to star systems. I have ended civilizations. My very presence brings terror to entire sectors of space." "And yet," Chen replied, "you're the only being in the galaxy powerful enough to keep him truly safe. You're immortal, or near enough. You're intelligent beyond measure. You have the strength to protect him from any threat, and the wisdom to guide him through life." The baby chose that moment to wake, opening bright blue eyes that immediately fixed on the massive dragon above him. Instead of crying or showing fear, the infant gazed up at Kithara with the fearless curiosity that only the very young possess. "What makes you think I would not simply devour this morsel the moment you leave?" the dragon asked, though her voice had grown notably quieter. Chen smiled, an expression that seemed to confuse many of the alien delegates who were unfamiliar with human facial expressions. "Because despite your reputation, Great Kithara, you've never actually harmed the truly innocent. Your targets have always been those who threatened others, who spread cruelty and chaos. You may be feared throughout the galaxy, but you're not evil." The dragon's massive form shifted slightly, a movement that would have sent most beings fleeing in terror. But Chen held her ground, still cradling the infant, who continued to stare up at the ancient creature with unblinking fascination. "The child has a name," Chen continued. "Marcus Yang Petrov. But what you call him will be your choice. We ask for nothing in return except that you give him the chance to grow, to learn, to become whatever he chooses to be." Kithara lowered her great head until her snout was only meters from the human ambassador. When she spoke, her mental voice was barely above a whisper, audible only to Chen and perhaps a few of the more sensitive delegates. "And if I accept this gift, what becomes of your war against the Void Hunters? Chen's expression never wavered. "We'll fight them ourselves, as we always have. This offer isn't conditional on your aid. Whether you help us or not, whether we survive or fall, the offer stands. We believe every child deserves a chance at life, and we believe you can give him a better one than we can." The dragon stared at the infant for what felt like an eternity. Around the chamber, delegates held their breath, communicating in frantic whispers about the unprecedented nature of what they were witnessing. Never in recorded galactic history had any species offered their young to another as anything other than tribute or sacrifice. Finally, Cathara extended one massive claw, each digit longer than Chen's entire body. With delicate precision that seemed impossible for such a large creature, she gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Marcus, rather than showing fear, immediately grasped the tip of the ancient dragon's claw with both his small hands, gurgling happily as he did so. "Interesting," Cathara murmured, her 6 eyes studying the fearless infant. "Very interesting indeed." Ambassador Chen carefully stepped forward, preparing to place the baby within reach of the dragon's claws. As she did so, she whispered softly, "His favorite song is an old Earth lullaby called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. He likes to be held when he sleeps, and he's allergic to certain proteins. I have all his medical information and care instructions in this data pad." She placed a small device next to the baby, then stepped back, her duty completed. "You would truly leave him here?" Cathara asked. "With no guarantee of his safety?" "With every guarantee," Chen replied. "You are Cathara the Deathbringer, the most feared being in the galaxy. What could possibly threaten him under your protection?" For the first time in millennia, something that might have been a smile crossed the dragon's massive features. It was a terrifying expression that sent several more delegates fleeing, but Chen stood firm. "Very well, little mammal," Cathara said, carefully gathering the infant in her claws. "I accept your gift, but understand this. I do not make promises lightly. If I take responsibility for this youngling, then he becomes mine in all ways. I will raise him as I see fit, teach him as I choose, and shape him according to my will." "We understand," Chen nodded. "We only ask that you give him love." "Love," the dragon repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar word. An interesting concept from such a young species. As Ambassador Chen prepared to leave, she turned back one final time. His parents wanted him to see the stars, all of them. With that, the human representative departed, leaving behind the most precious thing her species had to offer. As her transport pod disappeared through the chamber's exit portal, the assembled delegates began to disperse, each racing to contact their respective governments about the unprecedented events they had witnessed. But Cathara remained motionless, studying the small human infant who had somehow managed to grasp not just her claw, but perhaps something far more significant. The baby slept peacefully in the protective curve of her talons, completely unaware that his life had just taken a turn beyond anything his species had ever imagined. In the vast emptiness of space surrounding the diplomatic station, the Void Hunters continued their relentless advance toward the populated sectors of the galaxy. But for the first time in 3 millennia, Cathara the Deathbringer found herself thinking about something other than war, conquest, or the endless cycle of violence that had defined her existence. She found herself thinking about lullabies. 5 years had passed since the day Ambassador Chen placed an infant in the claws of the galaxy's most feared predator. The ancient dragon's lair, carved deep within the hollow core of a dead planet orbiting a dying star, had undergone transformations that would have baffled any being who remembered Cathara's previous reputation. Where once the caverns had echoed with the screams of captives and the grinding of bone beneath massive claws, now they resonated with something far more unexpected: laughter. The walls that had been decorated with the skulls of defeated enemies now displayed crude drawings made with salvaged crayons, depicting stick figures of a dragon and a small human holding hands beneath a yellow circle that might have been a sun. Marcus Yang Petrov, now 5 years old, stood barely 1 meter tall, his dark hair perpetually messy despite his guardian's attempts to maintain some semblance of grooming. He wore clothes that Kithara had painstakingly crafted from the finest materials she could acquire, though her understanding of human fashion left something to be desired. The result was a peculiar combination of imperial silk and battle-tested armor plating that somehow managed to be both practical and endearing. "Kitha!" Marcus called out, his young voice echoing through the vast chambers as he ran toward the dragon's resting area. He had never managed to pronounce her full name correctly, and she had long since stopped correcting him. "Kitha, look what I made!" The massive dragon lifted her great head from where she had been studying reports transmitted from her network of information gatherers scattered across the galaxy. These days, rather than demanding tribute from conquered worlds, she found herself commissioning educational materials, children's books translated into standard galactic, and various learning toys that could withstand the occasional application of dragon fire when Marcus's experiments went awry. "What have you created this time, little star?" Kithara asked, using the pet name that had evolved from his fascination with the astronomical bodies visible through the transparent sections of their home. The endearment always carried warmth in her mental voice, a tone that would have shocked any of the billions of beings who still feared her across the galaxy. Marcus proudly held up a small mechanical device he had assembled from various components salvaged from disabled spacecraft that Kithara occasionally brought home. The contraption was roughly spherical, covered in blinking lights, with several extending appendages that moved in coordinated patterns. "It's a friend robot," Marcus announced with the confidence only a 5-year-old could muster. "I programmed it to help with maintenance tasks around the lair. Watch this!" He pressed a small button, and the device immediately began scanning the nearest wall surface, apparently searching for imperfections or damage. Kithara's 6 eyes focused on the device with genuine amazement. She had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, had seen technologies that could reshape reality itself, but somehow this simple creation by a human child seemed more wondrous than all of them combined. "The engineering principles are surprisingly sound," she observed, extending one claw to examine the robot more closely. "Where did you learn about autonomous systems integration?" "From the books you brought me," Marcus replied matter-of-factly, "and from watching how the station's maintenance drones work when we visit the trading posts. Plus, you explained how your own sensor networks function, so I just tried to copy that on a smaller scale." The dragon felt something that would have been impossible to explain to her former enemies. Pride. Not the savage satisfaction of conquest or the grim pleasure of victory in battle, but the deep, warm pride of watching someone she loved achieve something remarkable. "Your parents would have been proud," Kithara said softly, a phrase she had taken to using whenever Marcus accomplished something particularly noteworthy. She had made it her mission to learn everything possible about human development, child psychology, and the cultural practices of Marcus's species, consulting experts across the galaxy in secret. Marcus set his robot down and watched it begin its exploratory movements around the chamber. "Tell me about them again," he requested, settling himself comfortably against the dragon's massive foreleg as she lowered herself to the ground. This had become their routine. Kithara had memorized every detail she could discover about Marcus's birth parents, creating a narrative that honored their memory while making a young child feel connected to his heritage. She spoke of their courage as colonists, their dedication to exploration, their love for each other, and the child they would never see grow up. Your mother was a botanical researcher, Cathara began, her mental voice taking on the cadences of a storyteller. She specialized in developing plant varieties that could survive in alien environments, helping to make new worlds habitable for human families. Your father was an engineer who designed life support systems for long-range exploration vessels. They met on a research station orbiting Jupiter and fell in love while working on a project to terraform the moons of distant stars. And they wanted me to see the stars, Marcus added, completing the familiar refrain. All of them, Cathara confirmed. Every star in every galaxy, if it were possible. As if summoned by their conversation, a soft chiming sound indicated an incoming transmission to the dragon's communication array. The holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, revealing the image of Ambassador Chen, though she looked considerably older than she had 5 years ago. Cathara, Chen's image said with a slight bow of respect, I hope this message finds you and Marcus well. I wanted to provide an update on the situation with the Void Hunters. Marcus immediately perked up with interest. He had heard fragments of adult conversations about the ongoing war, but Cathara had been careful to shield him from the more disturbing details of the conflict. The good news, Chen continued, is that our combined fleets have managed to slow their advance. We've established a defensive line along the Cygnus Arm that has held for the past 18 months. However, our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major offensive that could break through our positions. The ambassador paused, seeming to struggle with her next words. We're not asking for your intervention, Cathara. Our agreement was clear that Marcus was offered without conditions. But I thought you should know that if they break our lines, they'll likely target the outer systems first. Your current location should remain secure for the foreseeable future, but they're worried, Marcus said quietly, demonstrating the perceptiveness that never failed to surprise his guardian. The humans are scared they might lose. Cathara studied the child, who had somehow become the center of her existence. In 5 years, Marcus had transformed her understanding of what mattered in the universe. Where once she had seen only power and conquest as meaningful pursuits, now she found joy in teaching him to read star charts, watching him build impossibly complex structures from simple materials, and listening to his endless questions about how things worked. What do you think we should do, little star? She asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Marcus considered the question with the seriousness that children often bring to important matters. The humans gave me to you when they didn't have to, he said slowly. That was kind. And if the Void Hunters hurt the humans, then other species might think kindness is weakness. That wouldn't be good. The dragon felt something shift within her ancient heart. For millennia, she had acted according to her own desires, taking what she wanted and destroying what opposed her. But this small human had introduced concepts that she had never considered, obligation born not from fear or debt, but from something deeper and more fundamental. Besides, Marcus added with the matter-of-fact tone that always preceded his most profound observations, you always taught me that protecting family is the most important thing. Humans are my family too, even if I don't live with them anymore. Cathara extended her wing in a protective gesture that had become instinctive when Marcus was near. And what would you have me do about this war, assuming I chose to become involved? Talk to them first, Marcus suggested. You're really good at talking to people when you want to be. Maybe the Void Hunters don't understand that fighting isn't the only way to solve problems. The innocent wisdom of his response made the dragon realize just how much her perspective had changed. 5 years ago, her solution to any problem would have been overwhelming violence applied with precision and devastating effect. Now she found herself considering diplomacy as a first resort rather than a last one. And if they refuse to listen to reason? She asked. Marcus's expression grew more serious, and for a moment Cathara could see hints of the adult he would someday become. Then you show them why it's better to be friends with dragons than enemies. The transmission from Ambassador Chen concluded with a formal diplomatic closing, but not before she added a personal message. Please tell Marcus that Earth remembers him, and that his parents would be proud of the young man he's becoming. After the hologram faded, Marcus turned to his guardian with bright, curious eyes. Are we going to help them, Kitha? The dragon considered the question that would determine the fate of billions of sentient beings across the galaxy. 5 years ago, her answer would have been immediate and selfish. Now she found herself weighing factors she had never considered important: the value of kindness, the responsibility that came with power, and the example she wanted to set for the remarkable child who had somehow taught an ancient predator how to love. Yes, she said finally. But first you're going to help me plan how to do it properly. Marcus's face lit up with excitement. Really? I can help plan a real space mission? You can help plan the most important space mission in galactic history, Kythera confirmed. But first we need to make some modifications to our home. If we're going to be traveling among the stars, then we need to ensure you can see all of them properly. As Marcus began chattering excitedly about star charts and navigation routes, Kythera began calculating what would be required to end a galactic war without destroying the peace she had found in this unlikely family. For the first time in millennia, she had something truly worth fighting for, and she intended to ensure that Marcus would indeed see all the stars his parents had wanted him to experience. The Void Hunters would soon learn that there were fates far worse than death, and far more frightening than extinction. They were about to discover what happened when someone threatened the family of Kythera, the Deathbringer. The flagship of the Void Hunter Armada stretched across 50 kilometers of space, its biomechanical hull pulsing with the absorbed life energy of countless conquered worlds. Within its central command chamber, the apex predator that served as the fleet's supreme commander received reports from across the galaxy with the cold satisfaction of an apex species that had never encountered meaningful resistance. The Cygnus defensive line shows signs of fatigue, reported one of its subordinates, a creature that had once been something else before the Void Hunters converted it into part of their collective consciousness. Our psychological warfare protocols are working. Several species are beginning to withdraw their support from the human coalition. The apex predator's multiple sensory appendages twitched with approval. The Void Hunters had perfected the art of conquest through fear, breaking the will of their enemies long before engaging in actual combat. They had consumed over 3,000 civilizations using these methods, and they saw no reason why this galaxy should prove any different. Continue the pressure, it commanded through bioelectric pulses that traveled instantly to every ship in the vast fleet. Focus on isolating the humans. Once their allies abandon them, we can begin the harvest of this sector. It was at that moment that something unprecedented occurred. Every sensor array in the Void Hunter fleet simultaneously registered the same impossible reading. A single small vessel approaching their position at a velocity that should have been physically impossible for any craft of its size. Analysis, the apex predator demanded. Unknown configuration, came the reply. The vessel appears to be constructed from materials that do not exist in our databases. Energy readings suggest technology far beyond anything we have encountered in this galaxy. Threat assessment? Minimal. The craft is barely larger than a personal transport. Even if it possessed advanced weaponry, it could not pose a significant danger to the fleet. The apex predator would later realize that this was the moment when its billions of years of experience led it to make a catastrophically incorrect assumption. The approaching vessel was indeed small, barely the size of a luxury yacht by galactic standards. But it had been constructed over the past 6 months by Kythera herself, incorporating technologies and materials accumulated over 3 millennia of existence. The hull was forged from the condensed matter of collapsed stars, reinforced with crystalline structures that existed in folded dimensions beyond normal space-time. The power source was a miniature version of the dragon's own heart, a fusion of magic and science that generated energy output comparable to a small star. But the most remarkable feature of the craft was not its construction, but its crew. In the ship's observation lounge, Marcus Yang Petrov, now 5.5 years old, pressed his face against the transparent aluminum viewport and gazed in wonder at the Void Hunter fleet spread across space before them. He wore a specially designed environmental suit that Kithara had crafted for him, complete with atmospheric regulators and gravitational compensators that would allow him to survive in any environment she might encounter. "Wow," Marcus breathed, his eyes wide with the kind of fearless curiosity that had characterized his entire life. "There are so many ships. They must have come from really far away." "From beyond this galaxy," Kithara confirmed, her massive form coiled around the ship's central chamber in a configuration that somehow managed to be both protective and comfortable. "They have traveled for millions of years, consuming everything in their path." "That sounds lonely," Marcus observed with the kind of insight that never failed to amaze his guardian. "Maybe that's why they're angry all the time." The dragon's communication array activated, receiving the inevitable challenge from the Void Hunter fleet. The apex predator's image appeared on their main screen, its constantly shifting biomechanical features arranged in what passed for a threatening expression among its species. "Unknown vessel," the creature spoke in the flat, emotionless tone that had preceded the destruction of countless worlds. "You have entered a restricted zone. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or be destroyed." Kithara activated her own transmission array, and suddenly every screen in the Void Hunter fleet displayed the same terrifying image, the face of the galaxy's most feared predator. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and dramatic. Several smaller vessels actually began retreating before their commanders regained control. "I am Kithara," the dragon announced, her mental voice transmitting across all frequencies simultaneously. "You know my reputation. I come to discuss terms for your immediate withdrawal from this galaxy." The apex predator's features shifted into what might have been amusement. "Kithara, the Deathbringer, your reputation precedes you. However, you appear to be alone in a single ship against a fleet of 10 million vessels. Your legendary status will not protect you from the inevitable mathematics of this encounter." "I am not alone," Kithara replied, and gestured for Marcus to move into view of the transmission. The sight of a small human child aboard the dragon's vessel caused confusion throughout the Void Hunter command structure. They had been prepared for many possible scenarios, but a kindergarten-age diplomat was not among them. "Hi," Marcus said with a cheerful wave, completely unintimidated by the sight of one of the galaxy's most destructive entities. "I'm Marcus. Keitha and I wanted to talk to you about stopping the war." The apex predator's sensory appendages twitched in confusion. "You bring a youngling to negotiate with us?" "Marcus is my family," Keithra explained with a tone that carried deadly warning. "He has some things he would like to say to you." "I suggest you listen carefully." What followed was perhaps the most unusual diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. Marcus, with the earnest sincerity that only a child could muster, began explaining to the Void Hunters why their current approach to galactic conquest was fundamentally flawed. "See, the thing is," Marcus said, settling into the comfortable lecturing posture he had developed during countless conversations with his guardian, "you're trying to eat everybody, but that's not a good long-term plan. Eventually you'll run out of people to eat, and then what will you do?" "We will find new galaxies to consume," the apex predator replied, clearly struggling to maintain its threatening demeanor while engaged in philosophical debate with a 5-year-old. "But that's just the same problem. Only bigger," Marcus pointed out with irrefutable logic. Plus, when you eat everybody, you don't get to learn from them or be friends with them. Like, humans know how to make really good cookies, and the Centauri people have these amazing crystal gardens, and the Aquarians can sing songs that make you feel happy inside. If you eat them all, you miss out on all the good stuff. We do not require good stuff, the creature protested. We require only sustenance and the expansion of our territory. That sounds super boring, Marcus said with the kind of brutal honesty that only children can deliver without malice. Don't you ever want to do fun things? Like explore places just to see what's there? Or learn new games or make art? Across the Void Hunter fleet, millions of biomechanical entities found themselves confronted with concepts they had not considered in eons of existence. The idea of engaging in activities purely for enjoyment rather than survival or conquest was so foreign to their collective consciousness that it created processing errors in their shared mental network. I tell you what, Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that he was conducting diplomacy with universe-threatening entities. Why don't you try being friends with some people instead of eating them? We could introduce you to some really nice species who would probably love to show you interesting things about their worlds. We are not equipped for friendship, the apex predator stated. We are evolved for consumption and conquest. It is our fundamental nature. Marcus looked thoughtful for a moment, then turned to his guardian. Ketha used to be really scary too, but she learned how to be nice. Maybe they just need practice. The dragon's expression would have been terrifying to any being familiar with her reputation, but Marcus had long since learned to read the subtle emotions that crossed her massive features. What she was feeling now was not anger, but a complex mixture of pride, protectiveness, and something approaching maternal fury. The child makes an excellent point, Kythera said, her mental voice carrying harmonics that caused gravitational distortions throughout the local space. I, too, was once dedicated solely to destruction and conquest. However, I discovered that there are experiences far more rewarding than the simple accumulation of power. You speak of weakness, the apex predator accused. I speak of strength, the dragon corrected. The strength required to build rather than destroy, to nurture rather than consume, to protect rather than threaten. The strength to choose love over fear. Impossible. Love is a biological dysfunction that weakens survival instincts. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled by this statement. But love makes you stronger, he said with the confidence of someone who had experienced it firsthand. When you love somebody, you want to do better things and be a better person. Love is what makes Kitha the most powerful being in the galaxy. I am the most powerful being in the galaxy because I possess superior technology and accumulated resources, Kythara corrected gently. No, Marcus said firmly, shaking his head. You're the most powerful, because you choose to use your power to protect people instead of hurting them. That's what makes you really strong. The conversation might have continued indefinitely, but at that moment, long-range sensors detected something that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. A massive fleet was approaching from the direction of the galaxy's core, comprising vessels from every major civilization in known space. Ambassador Chen's voice crackled through the communication channels. Kythera, this is the combined fleet of the Galactic Alliance. We detected your approach to the Void Hunter position and came to provide support. We don't need support, Marcus announced cheerfully over the open channel. We're making friends with the Void Hunters. Well, we're trying to anyway. What followed was a three-way conversation that would later be studied in diplomatic academies across the galaxy. The arrival of the Allied fleet had given the Void Hunters pause, not because they feared the military threat, but because they were witnessing something unprecedented. An entire galaxy's worth of different species working together to protect each other. You coordinate your defensive efforts across species barriers, the apex predator observed with what sounded like genuine curiosity. This is inefficient. Individual species should focus solely on their own survival. But it's more fun when everyone works together, Marcus explained. And you get better results, too. Like humans are really good at figuring out new ways to do things, but Centauri people are better at building stuff, and Aquarians can coordinate really complicated plans because they're all telepathically connected. When you put it all together, you can do amazing things. Admiral Zhao of the Human Defense Fleet, speaking from the bridge of the flagship Endurance, added his voice to the discussion. The child is correct. Our alliance has made all of our civilizations stronger, not weaker. We share knowledge, resources, and protection. No single species could have achieved what we've accomplished together. Fascinating, the apex predator mused. This paradigm had not occurred to us. We have always operated under the assumption that cooperation was a sign of individual weakness. It's the opposite, Marcus said earnestly. Cooperation is what happens when you're strong enough to trust other people and smart enough to realize that everyone knows different things that can help. Kithara watched with amazement as her 5-year-old ward conducted philosophical discussions with entities that had consumed galaxies. She realized that Marcus was doing something she never could have accomplished alone. He was teaching the Void Hunters to see the universe from a completely different perspective. Perhaps, the dragon interjected carefully, you would be willing to consider a trial period of this cooperation concept. There are uninhabited star systems in this galaxy where your fleets could establish settlements while learning about non-destructive interactions with other species. And we could visit, Marcus added excitedly. I could show you how to make cookies and you could tell us about all the different galaxies you've seen. I bet you know some really cool stories. The apex predator was silent for several long minutes, communicating with the collective consciousness of its species across vast distances. When it finally responded, its tone had changed subtly. We will consider this proposal. However, we require guarantees that this cooperation will not result in weakness that leaves us vulnerable to other threats. The guarantee, Kithara said with absolute certainty, is that anyone who threatens a friend of mine will discover exactly why I earned my reputation as the Deathbringer. Marcus nodded seriously. Plus, if you're friends with everybody, then you have the whole galaxy to help protect you if something bad shows up from outside. And so began the most unlikely diplomatic resolution in galactic history. Over the following months, Void Hunter fleets gradually integrated into galactic civilization, establishing research stations and cultural exchange programs rather than harvesting worlds. Their vast knowledge of other galaxies proved invaluable for advancing scientific understanding, while their biotechnology revolutionized medicine and environmental restoration. Marcus became something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy, known as the child who had talked an apocalyptic invasion force into becoming productive members of society. But he remained largely unaware of his fame, more interested in showing his new friends how to play human games and learning about the strange and wonderful technologies they brought from distant stars. Kithara found herself in the unprecedented position of being viewed as a protector rather than a threat, and discovered that this role suited her far better than her previous reputation. She established a new code of conduct for herself. Her power would be used to defend those who could not defend themselves, and to ensure that no child would ever lose their family the way Marcus had lost his. Years later, when Marcus was old enough to understand the full significance of what had occurred, he would ask his guardian why she had been willing to risk everything for the sake of beings she barely knew. Because, Kithara would reply, you taught me that the purpose of strength is not to inspire fear, but to inspire hope. And because every parent in the galaxy deserves the chance to see their children grow up to see the stars. The galaxy had been saved not through military might or advanced weaponry, but through the simple wisdom of a human child who believed that everyone deserved friendship and that every problem could be solved with enough patience and kindness. And in the years that followed, as Marcus grew from a curious 5-year-old into a remarkable young man who would go on to become one of the galaxy's greatest diplomats, the universe learned an important lesson about the true meaning of strength and the transformative power of love offered unconditionally to those who needed it most.